This program is intended for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Pop Culture Podcast. Our guest this week is Mr. Mark Schultz, Olympic Gold Medalist, New York Times bestselling author of Foxcatcher, and UFC veteran. Mark, thank you for coming on this week. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Olympic Gold Medalist, New York Times bestselling author. Let's talk about wrestling. How did you get started in wrestling?
Well, I happened to be born into the same family as the greatest high school wrestler in history, Dave Schultz. And I had no power over him. And I didn't really realize how valuable self-defense was until I was helpless against my brother. And I thought I had a very bad lack of confidence, and I couldn't talk to girls. That was a big thing. And I thought I would get attention by becoming a gymnast. So I went into gymnastics. I was a really good athlete as like an elementary school kid, but I started gymnastics in the 8th grade. And in 2 years, I was the Northern California State Gymnastics champion, and for my age group. And that actually helped me quite a bit when I became a wrestler. But it wasn't giving me the confidence that I knew I needed to be happy with myself. So I didn't know anything about martial arts or self. I don't think anybody in 1976 knew anything like which was the best martial art. I mean, now we know because the UFC exposed it. But in 1976, everyone was sort of grasping at straws. They were looking at Bruce Lee movies. They were looking at, Black Belt magazine. Nobody really knew anything about how to fight, how to really fight good, And so I thought, because Bruce Lee was beating the crap out of 20 guys in Fists of Fury and Enter the Dragon, that if I could just learn what he learned, that I could at least beat one guy, my brother Dave. So I couldn't find a Bruce Lee studio near me, but there was a Chuck Norris studio near me.
Oh, yeah.
And I went into his club, and I was really good because I was a gymnast. I could hold my foot straight over my head. I could kick over the top of people's heads. I was really flexible. I was, incredibly athletic because of my gymnastics background. But then I got into a fight with Dave one day after my 4 months of Tang Sudo training. That's Chuck Norris's style, Tang Sudo. And I thought I would show him who the real boss of the family was at that point. And he beat me to a bloody pulp. And I quit Tang Sudo that day and went out for the wrestling team the very next day. And I wasn't very good. I started my junior year in high school. I only had 10 matches the entire year. And the coach kicked me off to the varsity because I wasn't good enough. I only won 4 out of 10 matches. And I really trained hard. I mean, I just pushed myself to death. And I just couldn't figure out why I wasn't winning. Because the only thing I knew about wrestling was what people were telling me about my brother, that my brother was this great technician and that I needed to become a great technician to be as good as him. So
Mhm.
I started, I wrote a book, a technique book, my own technique book.
Yep.
And I became a student of the sport. I turned wrestling into an academic subject. And I memorized that book more than I memorized any other school textbook. And it was my own. And I still couldn't win. I didn't understand why. I knew the moves. I was in incredible shape, but I still couldn't win. Finally, it occurred to me I needed to put power behind these techniques in order to make them work. And when I realized that, I started winning. And my senior year, I grew from a 130-pound junior to a 160-pound senior. I was 4-6 my junior year. I got kicked off the team. I transferred to Palo Alto High School, where coincidentally my gymnastics coach was also my wrestling coach. His name was Ed Hart. I submitted his name to be inducted into the California Wrestling Hall of Fame. And he became my wrestling coach. And I went to only 2 tournaments my entire senior year at 160 pounds, which was 30 pounds more than my junior year. And I lost my first match at my first tournament, and I was eliminated. My second tournament, I took 3rd place. That was my entire experience in high school wrestling tournaments, was those 2 tournaments. But I knew I was good because there was a guy on my team named Jeff Newman who was undefeated all year, and he beat the Central Coast Section champion in California. The Central Coast Section is over 90 schools. And he beat him, and I was beating Jeff in practice. So I knew, even though I wasn't winning when the pressure was on in competition, that I was good enough to win against high school guys. Plus, my dad was a professional comedian, and he's a drama professor. He's an English professor. He's a playwright, a songwriter. He's a professional comedian. He's a professional piano player. He's an incredibly talented actor and performer and director and songwriter, playwright. And I used to memorize Steve Martin routines and Bill Cosby routines, and I'd make people laugh. That's what I like to do. And so I would go over to Stanford, and I would get together with the coach there, and I'd repeat my Steve Martin routines and make him laugh. He liked me, let me hang around him. And so because I'm hanging around him, he let me work out with the Stanford guys. Well, Stanford guys, college guys the biggest jump in quality you're ever going to make in wrestling is from high school to college. Mm-hmm. And I'm working out with college guys, and I'm doing really good against them, and I'm beating Jeff Newman on the team. So I know I'm good enough to beat any high school kid, even though I haven't had the experience that high school kids have had. And at the end of the year, I won the league, the region, the Central Coast Section. I beat the Central Coast Section champion that my teammate Jeff Newman beat in the finals. And then I won the state tournament. I'm the only California state champion in history never to win a tournament prior to the state qualifiers.
Wow.
And that's how I got it. And then I got a scholarship to college. I went to UCLA my freshman year. I got a scholarship to Oklahoma State because my brother was at Oklahoma State at the time, and he became the freshman of the year. He was the number 1 recruit in the nation, and he was the highest placing freshman in 1978. And he came back from Oklahoma State, and I miraculously won the state, and he wants to work out with me, and now we're the same weight. And he beat me to death. He'd go, "Hey, you want to go work out?" And I'd be like, "Nah, I don't feel like it." And he'd be like, "You pussy." And I'd be like, "Okay, you're going to die." And we'd go work out, and he would just kill me like 50-0. And this went on every single day, all summer long. Want to work out? No, you pussy. Let's go. You're going to die. And he'd kill me. And every day. And finally, after 3 months of being destroyed every day, like 50-0, I thought, you know what? if I can't score any points on this guy, maybe I can just keep him from scoring points on me. So every time he would try something, I would back up, I'd break his lock. I just became this incredible staller. And I got so good at stalling, I didn't have to back up and stall. I could hold my ground and still stall. And I could even move forward and stall. And that's how my style developed. I had this practically impenetrable defense, because if I could keep my brother from scoring on me, I could keep anybody from scoring. My brother was the best in the world. I mean, he was second in Tbilisi as a high school senior. Tbilisi was the toughest tournament in the world at the time. So it was an incredible it was a curse, but it was also a great blessing to be Dave's brother.
Yeah.
And that's how it all got started.
Like I told you before we started the show, I think that your brother Dave is one of the, if not the best technical wrestlers. What do you think it is that he got about wrestling that he was so good?
Dave was born with dyslexia, and he was fat and pudgy when he was young. His nickname was Pudge, and he was a gigantic kid. I mean, when he was in the third grade, he was like 5'8", 160 pounds, and then he never grew again after that. It was weird, but he was just this huge kid. And but he couldn't read, and people made fun of him because he had dyslexia. Mm-hmm. And one kid made fun of him, and he took that kid and broke his head open on the concrete, and they had to take him to the hospital. And he became known as the toughest kid in school. And he was definitely the biggest. But then in about the 6th grade, I remember a couple of guys flunked 2 grades. They were called the Barnum brothers. And they were really good athletes, and they were really big kids. And I don't think Dave liked the fact that he was not the most dominant kid. He was not known as the toughest kid in school anymore. And one of his teachers said, "You should go out for wrestling." And so he went out for wrestling, and it was like a fish to water. He just, all he cared about. That's all he did. He'd wear his singlet every day. He'd wrestle anybody. He'd wear his shoes around his neck when he would ride. He had this like girl's bicycle with a little basket on the front, and he'd have his wrestling shoes in there. And he would challenge anybody, anytime, anywhere to a wrestling match. And it's all he cared about. And he was, and he had an incredibly intelligent brain. He was a very high IQ kid. Even though he couldn't read because of his dyslexia, he was incredibly intelligent. And he changed the wrestling game from a sport of almost pure conditioning to extreme technical expertise plus conditioning. I mean, conditioning, you got to have 90% of wrestling is conditioning, regardless of how good a technician you are. But he changed the game and made it much more technical than it became. I mean, when he was a high school senior and he beat 2-time NCAA champion Chuck Yagla and World Cup champion Joe Tice in the Great Plains Championship, everybody was like, how is this kid who's not built very well beating these great wrestlers? And they started to figure out this guy is a master technician. And I followed his lead, and I became a student of the sport of wrestling technique. I wrote my own wrestling technique book to try to improve, and that's how it happened.
Yeah, I know you talk about your book in your book, Foxcatcher, which it's a great book. I really recommend it to everybody. It's got a lot of like wrestling details. If you're into wrestling or if you're into like high school sports, it's a great book to read.
Thank you.
Yeah, you wrote it in a notebook, right? and you read it every day, and you just memorized every single page, and you had all that info in the back of your head. When you were in a match, you could just reach in and just pull something out. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, well, when you're suffering from a severe lack of confidence like I was, and your life and death became the same, you just do whatever you can to survive, and that's what I had to do to survive. I mean, life without being able to fight was not worth living to me. That's the way I that's the way I was.
Yeah. And so you're in college, and you're competing in tournaments in college.
That's right.
When did you realize that, I want to be the best wrestler in the world? When did that enter your head?
Well, I don't know if that ever really entered my head. What I thought was, I want to be the best that I could be. And I knew that because I was such a great athlete as a gymnast, and I had such a great training partner in my brother, that I could beat anybody in the world. And when I got into college, I actually got a full scholarship offer from Oklahoma State, because Dave was at Oklahoma State as a freshman. He took third in the NCAA as a freshman at Oklahoma State. And they didn't really want me, but they thought they were going to lose Dave if I went somewhere else. And so they offered me a full ride to kind of keep Dave. And Dave actually told me not to go there because they wanted him to keep cutting down to 150, and they wanted to put Ricky Stewart at 158. And Dave didn't want to do that. He was too big, and he was good enough to make the team at almost any weight. So he told me not to go to Oklahoma State. So I only had one other offer, and it was at UCLA. And it was a great offer. It was a full ride, and UCLA was awesome. And we had an incredible team there. I actually put together a fictional team from UCLA. I added all the Kistler brothers in, and I added up all the points that everybody on the team scored at the NCAAs, and we scored over 100 points, which the NCAAs was rarely won by a team over 100 points at that time. So we had a really good group of freshmen coming into UCLA, and I'm pretty sure we would have got the Kistler brothers. And anyway, there was a real problem with the coaching staff at UCLA. We had a great head coach, Dave Auble. We had a great assistant coach, but they were always fighting with each other, and it was causing a problem. It was dividing the team. And my brother and I, after my freshman year, my brother actually transferred from Oklahoma State to be with me at UCLA. And my record at UCLA was 18-8. And Dave redshirted. And then we both made the junior world team that year. And we met Jim Humphrey, who was the junior world coach. And we really liked him a lot. He was a really fun guy. He was a two-time national freestyle champion. He was a world silver medalist. And we just liked him a lot. And we thought, why don't we transfer to Oklahoma, where because we thought if we stay at UCLA and we win the NCAA, it's going to be a miracle, because they don't really care about wrestling at UCLA. There's no crowds. There's no money. We're driving around crammed in these little vans. Let's go somewhere where wrestling is important, like Oklahoma. And so we did. And it was scary. Going into the Oklahoma wrestling room for me was extremely frightening, because the guy that I was going to have to beat just to make the team at 158 was a badass named Israel Shepherd. I don't know if you know who Israel Shepherd is, but he is built like a Greek god, and he's fast. He's a black dude. He cornrows his hair, and those cornrows are like steel wool when they get grinded into your face. And he would scrape the skin off my face every practice, and I'd take a shower afterwards, and my skin was so sensitive from him scraping the skin off. I would like scream and shower.
That's stuff you don't even think of.
But I have come, I hated him. When I was in Oklahoma, I hated his guts because he was so tough. He was third in the NCAAs. But after my career at Oklahoma was over, I loved him. And I realized, had it not been for him and the adversity that he posed for me, I would not have become nearly as good as I became. And our coach, Stan Abel, who's an absolutely fantastic, I think the greatest college coach in history. I know Dan Gable's got the winningest record, but for me personally and for Dave, I think Stan Abel was the perfect coach for us because we had Jim Humphrey, Stan, we had Eric Weiss, who was from California. He was a two-time NCAA champion. I remember one time I tried to punk Eric Weiss one time when I clubbed him over the head really hard, and he clubbed me back so hard that my knees buckled.
Oh, geez.
He was so tough. Anyway, I came to a deep appreciation for Israel at Oklahoma, and Oklahoma was incredibly difficult. I mean, you talk about literally going into hell. That's what Oklahoma was to me. Our first day of practice, first day I got there, we went and Coach Abel ran us around this duck pond, and it was like 107 degrees out, 98% humidity. It was like running on the surface of the sun. I thought, how am I going to get through 4 years of this? There's no way. I can't do this. But I studied Eastern Indian philosophy, especially a guy named Jiddu Krishnamurti. And he taught me to continually live in the present and observe my mind and observe the world for what it is and not what it should be, and just live in the present and die to the past. And to just observe my mind without judgment and observe everything without judgment and just observe everything for what it is. And so I would live completely in the present. And if I wasn't in pain at that moment, I wasn't in pain ever. And I survived using that philosophy. And I got through 4 years of the most intense, brutal hand-to-hand combat I've ever experienced. And I was actually named in the recent a book that came out called The Golden Era of Amateur Wrestling, the 1980s, by Reginald Rowe, as the number one collegiate. I was voted by my peers the number one collegiate wrestler of the 80s. Number two was Ed Bannock, who I have an incredible amount of respect and love for. We made each other great. I mean, I think we made each other Olympic champions, well, along with our brothers. We're actually the only brothers to win the same Olympics. And we both sets of brothers won the same Olympics in '84. And I'm glad that we did too, because I really love them.
That's
that was
awesome.
one of my questions. If there had been any brothers that won gold medals at the same Olympics. Oh, let's talk about the Olympics. When did that enter the picture? When did you and Dave decide, let's go to the top of the mountain here?
Well, in 1983, I was the defending outstanding wrestler I won the outstanding wrestler award in 1982 when me and Bannock met in the finals. And then in 1983, everybody was shooting for me, and I had nothing to gain, everything to lose. My brother graduated. Andre Metzger, our the youngest world medalist ever, was on our team. He graduated. Jim Humphrey took a job as the coach of Canada, and I was basically left alone to go through my senior year alone, and everybody was shooting for me, and I just wanted to get through that year undefeated, win the NCAAs, and then I was going to quit wrestling and party like a rock star. But my brother had other ideas. My brother didn't wrestle in 1983 in college like me, and so he wasn't burned out like I was. And he won the U.S. Open, and he would not let me quit. And we both tried out for the world team that year. We both made it, and he wins the world championships. Well, I can't quit now. My brother's world champion, and I'm only a 3-time NCAA champion. The coach at Stanford used to point that out a lot, and that used to piss me off because he'd always introduce Dave as world champion. Oh, yeah, this is his brother Mark. And I was like, so I thought, okay, I'm going to keep wrestling. So I kept wrestling, and I made the 84 team, beat a very, very tough guy in the finals Olympic trials named Don Schuler.
Yep.
And he was an athlete in action. He was actually the only guy that I never beat at home at Oklahoma. My very first dual meet at Oklahoma was against Schuler, and we tied 7-7. And that's the only, and he actually beat me at the Olympic trials, one match, but I got lucky and I beat him 2 out of 3. And me and Dave both made the Olympic team. And then we both won the gold medal. Dave, I had a very interesting path to the gold medal, though. I had a match. When we weighed in, was the way you bracket the Olympic tournament is you step on the scale, and after you weigh in, you pull an egg out of a bucket, and inside that egg is a number. And if that's an odd number, you go on one side of the bracket. If it's an even number, you go on the other side of the bracket. Well, I pulled out the number 6. Well, because of the boycott, everybody was kind of poo-pooing the Olympics, because some of the Russians weren't there. But I still had the European champion in my weight, Rezat Karabajak. He beat all the Russians that boycotted the Olympics. And Dave still had Martin Nosp in his weight, who was the 1981 world champion, who beat Lee Kemp in the 81 Worlds. And Dave beat Kemp to make the 84 team. So we don't have an easy road to the gold medal. If we're going to win it, we don't have. And so I pick out the number 6. Rezat Karabajak is right behind me. He's from Turkey. He pulls out the number 8. And the first match, 2 wrestles 4, 6 wrestles 8, which means my first match is against the European champion, Rezat Karabajak, for the gold medal. I am scared out of my mind.
Yeah, I bet.
So the first move of the match, he limp arms me, attacks a single leg. I grab a double wrist lock. It's the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I have a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They call it a kimura.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never done this move before in competition or practice. I only saw it one time in the Pan American Games. I saw a Cuban doing it to some guy from Paraguay or Uruguay or one of those Guay countries. And I thought to myself, there's no way you can stop that move because the arm is locked. And what I was trying to do was I was trying to throw him into a front flip so that he would roll through and give me 2 points. But he hit his head halfway through the rotation, but I still held on to the arm, and his elbow snapped. And I felt it snap, and he just laid down flat. And the referees called him pinned. And I got up and I was like, thank God he's out of the tournament. And I knew why, but I didn't want to I didn't mean to hurt him. It was an accident. It was a violent sport. It's just a freak accident happened like that. And he was out of the tournament and he goes to the hospital. He comes back and they file a protest against me. They gave me the victory and then they filed the protest. But because the protest was filed 8 hours late, they decided to give him the victory for disqualification against me for excessive brutality. But they weren't going to throw me out of the tournament. They were just going to give me that loss on my record. But because it was a double elimination tournament, I could still win the gold medal, which is what I did. But I had a very tough time against the Canadian because my coach at Oklahoma went to Canada to become the national coach. And there's a super, super tough guy in Canada. His name is Chris Rinke. And Chris and I wrestled a bunch of times. And he beat me in the Pan American Games. And now he's got my coach in his corner. And he was beating me after the first round, 2-2. And then I took him down and gut wrenched him. And they gave me a point for the takedown and 2 points for the gut wrench. And then I look over at the scoreboard, and I'm thinking it's supposed to be 5-2, but it's only 4-2 because they took a point away from my gut wrench. And the way the criteria tiebreaker works is the guy that has a 2-pointer wins the tiebreaker. But if everybody has 1-pointers, whoever scores the last 1-pointer wins the tiebreaker. So it screwed me up in the head as to what I had to do to win. And as I'm doing all this calculating in my head, he takes me down again. Now it's 4-3. And so I'm still thinking I can give a point away, but I can't. But the referees have already called me twice for stalling, and they hate me because I broke the Turk's arm. They're looking for an excuse to throw me out.
Sure, yeah.
And I decided, you know what? I'm going to throw caution to the wind and just give a point away. And I shot in. I didn't even set it up. I just shot in, and he just happened to grab me in a front body lock. And I just happened to have an unstoppable counter to a front body lock called the duck scoop. And so I duck scooped him and took him down and won 5-3, thank God. And then I won the gold medal in the finals, 13-0 in a minute 59 against the Japanese guy, because my side of the bracket was loaded. The even side was loaded. The odd side was not nearly as tough. So it was easier for me in the finals than most people.
So
That's how it happened.
Yeah, so you win the gold medal. What's your first thought? What goes through your mind? You know, where do you go from there? Where do you go after the gold medal?
Well, it was fun because we went on this 3-city tour of it's called the Medalist Tour, and they put all the medalists on this plane, and there was no rules on the plane. You know, you're supposed to buckle up, and there was nobody buckling up, and people were throwing food from the cart everywhere and drinking. And it was insane. And then we would line up to meet President Reagan, and it just so happened that the head of the Secret Service, his name is Bobby DeProspero, his son, Bobby Jr., wrestled with me at Oklahoma University. And he even came to Oklahoma University to recruit some of us wrestlers to join the Secret Service, because wrestlers make good Secret Service guys. And so he's standing next to Reagan like he always is. And he sees me and Dave standing about 3/4 of the way back of the line of medalists. And he yells at us, "Hey, Mark, Dave, come on up here." And we walk up in front of everybody else, go through the velvet ropes, and I'm actually the first medalist to meet President Reagan. And then I told him I'd vote for him. You know, I don't know what to say.
Yeah. What do you say to the president?
I go to kiss Nancy on the cheek, and she turns and kisses me right on the lips.
Oh, wow.
And,
Wow.
anyway,
I don't know how many men can say that, Mark.
That was no tongue though.
Oh.
Thank God for that.
Pop says he'd hire a wrestler to protect him.
Now, then we went to New York and we went to Dallas and then we went home. That was the end of our medalist journey. And then the next year I won the world championships to show everybody that the boycott, my victory during the Olympics was no fluke. You know, everybody that boycotted the Olympics, I beat at the world championships the next year. And
that Olympics was the year I was born.
Yeah, that's right. You won the gold medal.
Man, I'm old. Man, I'm old.
Sorry, that was the first thing that popped into my head. I was like, when I saw what year you won the gold medal, I was like, oh.
I'm not far behind you, Mark. So
and I was like, I don't know if I should say that. It's gonna make him feel old. And I was like, I'm gonna say it anyway. I'm sorry.
How old are you?
Me?
Yeah.
36.
Oh wow, you're just a kid. I'm 60.
you don't look it.
You don't look 60.
You don't look it. So, you're gonna get ready for the next Olympics, and is that when John DuPont entered your life?
John DuPont entered my life in 1986. I actually, I was coaching at Stanford, and the coach there, after I got back from the 85 Worlds, the day I got back from the 85 Worlds, the coach at Stanford, I walk into the wrestling room, and everybody's clapping and cheering and slapping me on the back and telling me what a great job I did winning the Worlds. And the coach comes up to me afterwards and says he wants to talk to me in his office, which he does. And he fires me.
Jeez. Congratulations, you're fired.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Not only did he fire me, but I had taken this kid named Brad Hightower under my wing. He was a Stanford wrestler. And Brad's father owned a Toyota dealership in Los Angeles. And he wanted to show me his gratitude for taking such good care of his son. And he gave me a Toyota Tercel, brand new, just gave it to me. But because he couldn't get the tax write-off by giving it to me, he made it a tax-deductible donation to Stanford Wrestling. So legally, it was not my car, even though everybody knew it was mine. It didn't legally belong to me. So Chris Horpel, the coach of Stanford, not only fired me, but he took away my car.
Oh, what a dick.
And he gave it to my brother, who gave it to his wife, which in a way, it's very difficult for me to talk about this because my brother had a wife and kid. He needed more money than I did. And when Chris fired me and took my car away, he also took my salary and gave it to my brother. He doubled my brother's salary and gave him a car, and Nancy ended up getting the car.
Yeah.
But now, what am I going to do? I have no job. I have no health insurance. I have no vehicle. How am I going to compete against professional Soviet bloc wrestlers without any support? But he says that the coach told me, you can still come into Stanford and train with us if you want, anytime you want. Well, why would I want to volunteer my time for the guy to help the guy that just fired me?
Yeah.
So then Dave gets a call from John DuPont. And Dave says, well, he's committed to Stanford for another year, but you can talk to my brother Mark. So DuPont flies me out to Villanova. I did not go to Pennsylvania to join Team Foxcatcher. I went out there to start a wrestling program at Villanova. And it was, you could not have impressed me anymore. When I landed at the airport, I fly first class. I land at the airport. He picks me up in a helicopter, and we fly over all these crackerbox houses into this, what looks like a state park. And it's the DuPont estate. And so we land there, and he takes me over to Villanova. He shows me the John DuPont Pavilion. Letters are 4 feet high in light. He shows me the John DuPont swimming complex. Huge letters on the side of the wall. I'm like, this guy's got more money than God. Yeah. We can do anything we want here. And he tells me that if I take this job, he's not going to be a part of it. I didn't like him. From the very beginning, from the very first time I met him at the 1986 World Team Trials, I did not like him at all. And I did not want him near me. And when I took the job at Villanova, I made sure that he was not going to be a part of that program. And he told me he was not going to be a part of it, but he was going to be referred to in the brochure as a coach, whatever that meant.
Yeah, just in title or name, whatever.
Yeah.
Because he was paying the bills. He paid for it all, right?
Yeah, he paid for it all. But when I got there, he didn't come around for about the first 2 or 3 months. He didn't come around at all. And then he started coming around more and more and more. Mm-hmm. And pretty soon he was there every freaking day. Now, he supported the basketball team. He built that pavilion the year they won the NCAAs. He supported the swimming team. But he had nothing to do with basketball or swimming. But for some reason, he would not leave wrestling alone. He would not leave me alone. And he was always around me, and I couldn't get rid of this guy, and I really regretted the fact that I went there. And I thought, this guy's going to destroy my motivation. And he did. He actually threatened to ruin my career. He did that in a locker room one day. And I thought, what am I going to do? You know, I regret not joining the military right after that, because I grew up in the Vietnam era, and my dad rented his house to a family that had a kid that went to Vietnam, and that kid came back totally screwed up in the head. Yeah. I mean, just bonkers. PTSD out the window. And I was like, no way am I going to go in the military. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a stable training environment. And in 1988, a lot of people think that I was injured in the 1988 Olympics, but that's not true. It occurred to me during the 1988 Olympics that giving DuPont the prestige and status of producing an Olympic champion was immoral. And I threw my last match. I threw it 14-0. I made it so obvious that I was throwing it that I figured anybody could figure it out. And it just happened to be against another Turkish wrestler. And a lot of people in Turkey say, oh, he got revenge for Mark hurting the first Turkish guy. That's not really true. I would have thrown the match had it been a guy from Paraguay or Cuba or anywhere. I could not win a gold medal for Team Foxcatcher. And after I threw that match, I never wrestled again. And I don't regret doing that, because it accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. Yeah. But I did come back 8 years later to fulfill something that I wanted to prove to myself, was that I was willing to step into a no-holds-barred cage and fight bare-fisted against a very formidable opponent who now is actually a great friend of mine. Gary Goodrich is actually a great friend of mine. But that's the reason I got into wrestling in the first place. It wasn't to win tournaments. It was to learn to fight. And that's what I did. And I proved to myself that I had the ability to conquer my own fear.
So do you think that DuPont kind of killed your passion for wrestling?
He did. Absolutely did.
Yeah, that's a shame. Yeah, we'll get more into the movie. I know you've got a list of like 30 things inaccuracies.
Yeah, I got it right here.
And you know,
Whoa.
you touched on Goodrich, Big Daddy Goodrich. Jason Thornton asks, he says, Mark, let me put it on the screen here. Mark, you're a damn legend. Any idea why Bennett Miller and company decided to use some made-up fighter as opposed to Big Daddy Gary Goodrich in the UFC fight note in the film? Why they changed it? You know, and there's a scene where the group of wrestlers is actually watching UFC fight, and it's a Big Daddy Goodrich fight, and everybody's commenting what an amazing fighter he is. And here, you fight him and you beat him, and they don't even use Big Daddy Goodrich. You know, they just make up some random dude. I know Joe Rogan mentioned that on his podcast. I don't know why they changed that. That should have been more accurate, I think.
Yeah, I think because of the statements that Bennett Miller made in the press, that he did not want to give me the credit that I deserved. So he changed so many things that were true into things that were not true.
Let's get into it. Let's go through your list. We'll talk about the film. We'll talk about the film and the inaccuracies. So I know you've got a list of 29, 30 things.
Oh yeah.
Let's go through it.
Okay. Well, first of all, when DuPont is first seen in the movie, he's seen as clean, sober, wearing a white collared shirt. And the truth is, the first time I met DuPont, he was drunk, he was dirty, he was disgusting. He had varicose veins on his legs. He's had dandruff caked on his head. He had this weird orange Ronald McDonald hair that was parted in the middle. He had food caked on his yellow teeth. His arms were real skinny, like a girl. His stomach looked like he swallowed a basketball. He was drunk and on drugs, or both.
You know, every picture, I'm sorry to interrupt, but every picture that I see of John DuPont, I just think that man has to have a particular odd smell to him.
It's just a stench.
Yeah. Like musty or something.
I was born without a sense of smell, or I lost it as a kid. So I wouldn't know what anything smells like. I use that in wrestling when I figure four guys, and anyway. Anyway, he also Bennett Miller, the director, he strips me of my 1985 world title. I'm known in the movie as 84 world Olympic champion, not the 84 and 85 world champion that I was. And I don't know why he would do that. Maybe he's just a jerk. Doesn't make the movie any better. Matter of fact, it makes it worse, I think.
Yeah. I think so too.
I'm the only 1984 Olympic champion to win the 1985 Worlds. And I beat all the Soviets, boycotted the Olympics. I won the U.S. Open in 1985 at 198 pounds, beating the 198-pound world champion in 1985 in the finals. Because I lost my weight cutting gear on the plane, and my coach Bobby Douglas said you can either hope your stuff shows up, or you can take this $20 and go eat and go up a weight. So I took $20, went up a weight, and I won the U.S. Open anyway. I said I didn't move to Pennsylvania to join Team Foxcatcher. That's a big mistake in the movie. I moved there because of the story I told you about getting fired and going to Villanova to start a program there at Villanova. Let's see what else.
Tom says, "I love hearing someone with so much pride."
Let's see. I talked about how Villanova's athletic director and the president, they looked the other way. That was not in the movie. They show a scene in the movie of me. They have this soft music playing, and it's me showing DuPont these wrestling moves. I never showed DuPont any wrestling moves. I couldn't stand touching the guy. And the worst scene in the movie is Bennett Miller decides to create a scene that is a vicious lie, where DuPont wakes me up at 3 a.m. to drill wrestling moves in some dark room in DuPont's mansion that Bennett Miller called the gallery. The truth is, DuPont and I never drilled any moves together. There are no mats in DuPont's house, and there's no room called the gallery. And for some reason, Bennett Miller decides to frost my hair. I don't know why.
Yeah, that was a weird scene. That felt so out of place. I know we were talking about this before the show, but like that was just I get it, you know.
Bennett Miller.
It was a Channing Tatum choice.
Maybe it was a Channing Tatum choice. Maybe.
I don't know. But he decides to downplay the significance of UFC 9. It was a huge event before the term MMA was even invented. It was NHB, no holds barred, in the early UFCs. You know, the only rules were no eye gouging and no biting. Everything else was legal, except if you decided to wear shoes like I did, you couldn't kick. And I thought I would need to wear shoes because my style requires that I have traction.
Yeah.
So everything else was legal. You could attack his groin, you could fish hook his mouth, you could break his fingers, you could pull his ears off. I mean, it was brutal. And your
fight, that's a pretty historic fight. That's kind of legendary fight because you went in there literally at like 5 minutes notice. You were like the very last minute replacement. How prepared were you for that fight?
What's that?
How prepared were you for that fight?
You know, I was actually pretty prepared because there's a guy that doesn't get any credit in this whole story, and his name is Mike Bolster. He was my heavyweight at BYU. He was the BYU heavyweight wrestler. And me and him would put on gloves, take our shoes off, and we would fight no holds barred in the BYU wrestling room every day for about 3 months, 2 or 3 months before I was asked to train Dave Beneteau fight in UFC 9 by my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor, Pedro Sauer, who's a black belt of Rickson Gracie.
Yep, I was a student of Pedro Sauer. I trained with Henry Matamoros under Pedro Sauer until Henry left and opened his own school, and then we switched to Carlson Gracie. Yeah,
Pedro is really he had the first no holds barred fight in Utah against Mr. Utah, the bodybuilder, Lance Batchelor, and he won that. And it was a brutal fight. And anyway, I don't know why the director downplayed the significance of that fight. It's a historical fight. He trades my opponent, who's a black Canadian guy wearing a gi, with a white Russian guy not wearing a gi. I don't know why he would do that.
Like we were talking about, there's a scene in the movie where the group of wrestlers is watching TV, and it's a UFC fight, and it is a Big Daddy Goodrich fight, and all the team members are commenting like, "Oh, what a good fighter he is!" And here it is at the end of the movie, you're fighting Big Daddy Goodrich, but they just downplay it so much.
It was almost like they were trying to set it up for that they were going to put that in there, and then they decided not. They decided to change it to someone else.
I don't know.
Yeah, the scene takes place in 1988, and the UFC 8, where Goodrich fights, is in 1996, 8 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the fight that I had with Goodrich was in Cobo Arena, and there was a crowd of about 10,000 people. It was packed, and they were screaming, and they were loud. But in the movie, it's like a circus sideshow. There's not that many people. It's kind of quiet, and everything's just dark, and it doesn't look anything like Cobo Arena.
No.
And also, DuPont never gave me any speech in the movie. DuPont gives me a speech, and in that speech, I say, I've been looking for a father figure all my life, and I finally found it in John DuPont. What a vicious lie.
Yeah. My
father died when he saw that scene. That hurt my dad so bad. Why would he do that to my dad? That takes a real prick,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
terrible.
It is.
Yeah, it sounds like you got a good, close relationship with your dad, so you're really not looking for a father figure because you've already got one.
I love my dad.
I'm sorry, Mark.
Anyway, he never gave me a speech he never gave me a speech to read in front of any event ever.
The philatelist ornithologist speech never happened.
The what?
The
philanthropist or philatelist,
ornithologist, whatever. That speech never happened.
Stamps.
I don't know what you're talking about. What are you talking
about? That was the scene in the movie where he's
speech. It was really dumb. That whole scene.
They were in the plane, and there was another part where he was trying to introduce him as a philatelist, which is a stamp collector.
Oh, okay.
And they made it just really stupid and goofy.
It was a dumb scene.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I never did cocaine before giving a speech.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I did admit to doing cocaine, though.
Yeah.
One time, this was not in the movie, but it's in my book. DuPont showed me a kilo of cocaine in his dresser drawer with the words evidence written in the bright orange letters on the side of the bag.
Mm-hmm.
And he stuck a straw in the bag, and he snorted a hit I thought would put him into cardiac fibrillation immediately. And I asked him, what do you want me to do if you go into cardiac fibrillation? He goes, call my lawyer. I go, your lawyer? Really? Okay. So anyway, I'm not proud of the fact that I tried cocaine, but I did try it.
Yeah.
I never looked up to DuPont as a coach, a leader, a mentor, example, and it's certainly not a father figure. That is absolutely for sure. Matter of fact, I considered him the worst influence on the planet and ultimately destroyed my wrestling career. He threatened to destroy my career, and he did.
Yeah.
And I never rode in a Learjet to the World Championships in 1987 to when I won the Worlds in 87. I didn't ride in a Learjet with DuPont there. I never said, I just don't want to let you down.
Yeah.
He puts DuPont in my corner in the 1980 Olympics. I never let DuPont sit in my corner. I would not. He wanted to sit in my corner so bad, but I would never let him. I didn't want his negative influence around me at all. Even in the 87 Worlds, I didn't want to touch the guy, but I reached over the railing. He grabbed me, pulled me in, and started hugging me. And I sat there kind of frozen, and then I kind of pushed him away.
Yeah.
But I never let him sit in my corner ever. They had me and DuPont in a poster together. Yep. We never were in a poster together. I mean, I was the poster boy for Team Foxcatcher. I don't know if you've seen that poster where I got my hands up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They drenched me with baby oil, make it look like I'm sweating, but I wasn't. But it was. I don't know. I like the poster. I don't like the fact that I'm wearing a Team Foxcatcher uniform or that the words Team Foxcatcher is underneath me. But I like the way I look in the poster. Yeah. But I never was in a poster with DuPont. I never posed for a poster with DuPont. I never gave DuPont my medals to stick in his trophy room. I wouldn't let him get close to my medals. I kept my medals in storage, just specifically to keep them away from him. Mm-hmm. I didn't trust him at all. There's some minor errors in the movie, like he never gave me an ornithology book with binoculars to go bird watching. That's not really that important, but that never happened. It's just the timeline is so screwed up. Dave and I were never on the farm at the same time. Never. There was actually a year between the time that I left and the time that Dave arrived on the farm. But they've got us on the farm at the same time.
Yeah.
In the movie. That never happened. That's pretty much the main things that are wrong, I would say, with the movie compared to the truth, which is in my book. Mm-hmm. But there is one thing I did not put in my book, and that is the fact that I threw my last match in the 88 Olympics. And I wish I would have put that in my book, but there was kind of a dishonorable, feeling against people that would throw matches intentionally, like in pro wrestling and stuff. And so I didn't really want to admit that in my book, but that's the truth. I did throw that last match just because I couldn't win for DuPont. I felt it was immoral.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all of the oh wait, there's something else. Oh wait, there's actually a lot more here. Yeah, they never showed me dating girls. When I was at Villanova, I dated a bunch of girls.
That's right. Yeah, the movie Mark never dated anybody. I thought about that.
It makes me and Dave seem like we're very different personalities, but in fact, Dave and I were very similar in a lot of ways. We would finish each other's sentences. We were almost like twins. Yeah,
one thing that I noticed that's different about movie Mark and you is the movie Mark kind of seemed like your typical, stereotypical dumb jock, and you're actually a very intelligent guy. You're a college graduate. You're a smart guy. Very different from that movie Mark kind of personality.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's another thing that I have listed here that is one of the things that's wrong. I was the student athlete of the year at Oklahoma University my senior year. I have a master's in exercise physiology. But they've got me like this, like this caveman, dumb, inarticulate jock that can't put two words together. They make it seem like the murder was tied to me leaving. That's not really true. Dave lived on the farm for 6 years before the murder. Mm-hmm. Here's another big one. They make Dave the head coach of a fictional college called Wexler. Mm-hmm. first of all, there is no college called Wexler, but that's fine. But Dave was never a head coach, and they have me as his assistant. I was never Dave's assistant at any college. Matter of fact, the only head coach between the two of us is me. I was the head coach at Brigham Young University for 6 years.
Yeah.
Dave never became a college wrestling coach. I mean, he was an assistant at Wisconsin. He was an assistant at Stanford, but he never became a head coach anywhere.
Mm-hmm. When he was in, I'm in Milwaukee. I'm in Wisconsin, and I remember that.
Right. I was actually the 1998 Western Athletic Conference Coach of the Year.
Oh, wow.
They show me living alone in some rundown apartment, some place near Wexler College. I don't know. Me and Dave, we lived with our dad in Palo Alto when we both coached at Stanford before I went to Foxcatcher. And that's where we were training together for the Olympics. And they show in the movie, the director has DuPont showing me a brand new national training center that he built on his estate. The truth is that training center was built 2 or 3 years after I left Foxcatcher. It was built about a year after Dave arrived at Foxcatcher. And the director never mentions Villanova University in the movie. And that's the whole reason I went to Pennsylvania in the first place.
Yeah.
And Villanova never intended to allow DuPont to start a Division I program, and they never gave him a wrestling room. They only let the team roll mats up and down every day in this indoor space for all the sports to train. And the program was doomed from the beginning because DuPont was a paranoid schizophrenic. It was the most unstable team, unstable environment any wrestler could possibly have tried to survive in. It was insane. I mean, he pointed a gun at my girlfriend. He pointed a machine gun at Dan Chade. Dan Chade. That's another thing they have. They have in the movie, they have DuPont shooting a gun through the ceiling of a roof. Now, it's true that he dressed up as a cop and walked into the wrestling room and pointed a gun at the Villanova wrestlers, but he never shot any bullets through the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
They have me, the director has me moving into some house called the Chalet on the farm as soon as I arrive in Pennsylvania. That's not true. I moved into an apartment in Rosemont, Pennsylvania, which was right next to Villanova University. And I lived there for a year before I moved into that chalet on the DuPont estate. And that's Rosemont's about 20 minutes from Foxcatcher Farms.
Mm-hmm.
This is a big one. Bennett Miller, the director, shows Dave negotiating a deal in the movie to pay me even if I'm not living on the farm or training there. This makes me look pretty pitiful. And the truth is, a deal was made, but I made it. And I made it in order to avoid the situation that existed at Stanford, where the deal was that both brothers would be paid the same as long as one of them was at Foxcatcher, because I didn't want to go through what I went through at Stanford. So I made that a part of my contract at Villanova with DuPont. So, but in the movie, they have Dave making that deal like he's protecting me. That's not true. It's a lie. It's a vicious lie. It makes me look bad. And so actually, when I started working at Villanova, Dave was getting paid double. He was working at Wisconsin. He's getting paid by Foxcatcher and Wisconsin.
Wow.
And then you're right about the dumb jock thing, and when I got my master's degree in exercise physiology at Brigham Young University, I had a 3.66 GPA.
That's excellent. Yeah, I've been following you on Twitter for a long time now, and you're a very intelligent guy. Your tweets are, nothing like movie mark. So that was, I don't know why that was a dumb change. Like, give the guy some intelligence.
Yeah. Anyway, I think.
Do you want to talk about his horse riding accident that they left out of the movie?
That's another thing they don't talk about in the movie. When DuPont, this is what pisses me off the most. They tried to create some sort of sexual tension or something. The director I could kill him for this. Between my character and DuPont. And the truth of the matter is, DuPont got into a horse riding accident when he was in his 30s. And he was he was a pentathlete. And one of his mother's horses threw him off onto a fence. You know how they jump over those fences into the pentathlon? Yeah. Well, the horse stopped. DuPont flies off, hits his testicles on the fence. They become infected and have to be removed. And he lives the rest of his life as a eunuch.
Mm-hmm. It's quite a nut shot. Yeah, I wonder if he saved him. I bet he saved him in the mayonnaise jar, put him in the trophy room. He seems like the kind of guy. But yeah, that was
add to the stench.
Like
that explains why he has that strange sort of effeminate look about him.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that when he told me that, I'm one of the very few people that he told that to. Very few. But when he told me that, I sincerely felt for him. I mean, if that happened to me, I'd probably be pretty screwed up too. I'd be a drug addict, maybe paranoid, schizophrenic too. I mean, your testicles create not just testosterone. They create like 50 other chemicals that make a man a man.
Yeah.
And he lost all that and just screwed him up.
Yeah, he had plastic testicles. Why would you even want plastic? Like if I lost mine, like I don't need plastic testicles. Don't remind me. But yeah, that and it seemed like when his mom died, he kind of lost more grip on reality too. He was such a mom boy.
Yeah,
mom there.
In a way, that's not all his fault. His father left him when he was 2 years old,
mm-hmm.
and his brothers and sisters were so much older than him. They left the farm long before he, got to be of any age to have any influence on him. And he does not have a great relationship with his brothers and sisters. I met his sister one time, and they don't get along. And so I don't blame DuPont 100% for turning out the way that he turned out. I mean, he's dead now. So,
yeah, I mean, this guy was born into one of the wealthiest families in America. His mother probably doted on him. He was probably never told no when he was growing up. He got everything he wanted.
You think she doted on him, or
doted?
Just paid lots of people to take care of him and wasn't present.
Paid people to take care of him and be his friends or whatever. Now he's an adult and he's paying everybody, and nobody says no to him. Nobody questions him or confronts him on his poor decisions because he's paying everybody.
Did he actually pay people off to like make it look like he won?
Oh,
yeah, that's true. Valentin Jordanov got a couple of Bulgarian wrestlers, and there. I know there was a guy named Jose what's his name? Jose Betancourt actually threw a match to DuPont. I don't know how much money he was given, but there was a Bulgarian that was paid about a year's salary to throw a match to DuPont. And he was beating DuPont so bad, he realized he only had a couple seconds left in the match, and he grabbed DuPont, pulled him on top of him, and pinned himself so he could get paid.
Pulling John DuPont on top of you.
That doesn't look obvious at all.
I'd have to be paid quite a bit of money to do that. So, John DuPont murders your brother Dave. There's really no warning. There's no, nobody sees it coming. I can't imagine what that is like. What's your first thought when you hear that?
It's been, let's see, that was 1996, and now it's 25 years later.
Yeah.
I've lived with this for 25 years, and I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I know he's alive. Matter of fact, I know his life is a lot better than mine.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, and I don't tell this to many people. I probably shouldn't even tell it to you guys, but
we won't tell anyone.
I received a letter. Now, it could be a malicious hoax. It could be genuine, but I received a letter from Dave in 2015. And he uses a earthly man to translate this letter for him.
Mm-hmm.
And he describes what his life is like in the afterlife. And he says it's magnificent beyond description. It can't even be described in earthly terms. And he's surrounded by the most amazing brothers and sisters. And he said, you will know immediately when you get there what he's talking about. Now, this could be a malicious hoax, or it could be a genuine. I don't know. It's a 3-page letter, and I don't know why anyone would go to so much trouble to perpetrate a malicious hoax that send me a letter just filled with so much love.
I was going to say, if the letter gave you hope and happiness and love, I don't think it would be malicious. I don't think that'd be a malicious letter. I think that, depending on what you believe, I'm a God-fearing man. I'm a Christian. I believe in heaven. I would take that as a blessing.
It's beautiful any way you look at it.
Yeah.
I tend to believe it. I happen to believe. I think it's genuine. It's miraculous. It's one of probably the most miraculous thing that's ever happened to me. If it is genuine,
yeah.
I still question everything. I'm a skeptic naturally. I questioned the Book of Mormon before I joined the church, and I tried to prove it was false, and that's what convinced me it was true, and that's why I joined. I come from a long line of Jews. My dad's Jewish, 100% Jewish, but I guess I consider myself a Messianic Jew. I believe in Christ.
Yeah, that's I would look at it as a blessing. So, even after, John DuPont is arrested, and I think his arrest video is on YouTube, and it's pretty hilarious. Like, he gets tackled by the police going out to turn on his heat. But even from prison, like your nightmare is not over, because he sends private detectives to follow Dave's family, and he sends them letters saying,
He sent to my house too.
To you too. Wow.
Yeah. I had a private detective come to my house and ask me if I would do anything, or if I could do anything to help DuPont get out of prison.
Wow.
I mean, you know how desperate he's got to be to ask me?
The guy whose brother he shot.
Yeah.
and I when I found out what he wanted, I videotaped the whole thing and sent it to the prosecutors, and then slammed the door in his face.
Yeah, I would too. Did those letters ever stop, or did he continue to send letters to you and to Dave's family? I can't imagine. Like,
I didn't know he sent letters to Dave's family.
Yeah, it was. I was just reading it online that he sent letters like "I'm going to get you" or "I can get you anytime," something like that. It was.
Really?
Yeah. I'll pull up the articles and I'll DM you on Twitter. I was just reading.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested. I never heard that.
Yeah.
That's sick.
Yeah. DuPont was, I don't know. Was he ever diagnosed with any mental illness?
Yes. Paranoid schizophrenia. And the prosecutors even agreed, because the prosecutor, Joe McGettigan, who was the same prosecutor that put away Jerry Sandusky, by the way, the child molester.
Mm-hmm.
He had a sister who's a paranoid schizophrenic, and he recognized that DuPont had the same symptoms as his sister. So even though I didn't think that DuPont was mentally ill in any way, I thought he was totally faking it, which he was in a way, because if you look at him throughout the trial, he grows his hair out really long, he grows his beard out really long, he gets wheeled in by a wheelchair. Well, he gets convicted. And during his sentencing, he walks in, clean cut, gets sentenced, walks out. No wheelchair.
Yeah.
It was all an hour.
Molly and I were talking about that. That's in the documentary, that the lawyers told him to grow his hair out and look as crazy as you can so he can get you off on insanity.
That's right.
But yeah.
But he really, if the prosecutor, and I trust Joe McGettigan's judgment.
Yeah.
He says that he was a paranoid schizophrenic. I believe him. But he was not insane. And the definition of insanity is you don't know right from wrong. And he knew right from wrong. That's why he was convicted. And I think the jury was accurate. You know, they gave him third-degree murder.
Yeah.
The judge was very tough on him, gave him 13 to 30 years.
From the video clips that you can see in the documentary, they show some like actual footage, some clips and stuff, and a bunch of them. But you see some of the personality traits and the stuff that he had, and you can just see the weird social. He wasn't a good, like he was very socially awkward, I guess.
Yeah. You should have watched. You should have seen. I should have sent this to you, but there was the video I was telling you about that the hospital made for him when he like built an emergency room or something. Yeah. He had the hospital make this infomercial about John DuPont, how great John DuPont was, and it opens up. He's by his pond, and he's like, "Well, I'm an excellent fisherman when the fish are cooperating." It's really weird, dude.
I know what you're talking. I know what film you're talking about.
Yeah, they're just weird. What was it like seeing Steve Carell in character as John DuPont?
Yeah.
Did you want to?
He looked pretty creepy. He did a great job. I think Steve Carell is one of the greatest actors of all time. I think Channing and Mark Ruffalo are too. Mark Ruffalo just recently starred in a movie called Dark Waters.
Yeah.
About a lawyer named Rob Bilott, who's actually a friend of mine now. And he's playing a lawyer who's going after the DuPont Chemical Company for poisoning every living creature on the planet with a chemical called C8. And it's in every Teflon pan that people have cooked with. And it is now in every human and every living creature on the planet. And it's kind of remarkable that Mark Ruffalo would play my brother Dave, and then play Rob Bilott, who Dave was killed by DuPont, and Rob Bilott ended up suing DuPont and winning $670 million in a class action lawsuit.
Yeah. It comes full circle. And DuPont, or Mark Ruffalo is from Kenosha, just a little bit south.
Is he really?
Ruffalo has had a very interesting life. His brother was killed like my brother was killed.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, he's a good actor. What was it like seeing him in character as Dave?
I thought he did a great job.
Yeah.
I think if people knew how good a job, what Dave was really like, I think he probably would have won the Academy Award. Now, most people don't know this, but the movie was made twice. It was made once, I think, in 2014, and then once in 2015. The first cut did not have Mark Ruffalo in it hardly at all. He was maybe in it for a minute and a half.
Oh, wow.
I called Mark after I saw the first release, and I said, "Have you seen this?" And he goes, "No." And I go, "Well, you better take a look at it, because first of all, you're not in it. And second of all, it's boring as hell. And it's about me, and I'm bored. Imagine what the public's going to be."
Yeah.
So they pulled it off the shelf. They re-edited it. Mark Ruffalo was given a much bigger part, and he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor because of that part.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes on to play Rob Bilott, and I just love Mark Ruffalo. He's so cool.
Yeah, me too. He's one of my favorite actors. He was really good in Zodiac. I don't know if you saw Zodiac, but it's probably my favorite performance of his. Just so good. How's Dave's family doing now?
Well, Nancy, she received the largest wrongful death settlement in the history of the world from DuPont. And his kids are set up financially, but they lost their father.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd give everything up just to have Dave back.
I'm sure they would.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the whole story is just, it's so sad. The world was, not only was your family robbed of Dave, husband, father, brother, but the world was robbed from a talented wrestler that could have gone on to be the best coach, when he was done wrestling.
Yeah. It kind of threw my life into a tailspin, because I had always been kind of Dave's I was always Dave's younger brother.
Yeah.
And Dave was the national coach for USA Wrestling one year, and I expected to follow him along at USA Wrestling, to be his assistant at USA Wrestling. And when he died, I never had very much contact with USA Wrestling after that. And I wish I don't know. I don't know. It just sort of, everything fell apart.
Yeah. When did you get into jiu-jitsu? When did you start with Pedro Sauer? Back by
1993, I think. It was right before the UFC came to America. I was sitting at my house. I was an assistant coach at Brigham Young University, and I was sitting at my house, and I got a phone call. And this guy, his name's Steve Bishop, and he's a Mormon missionary. We're not supposed to use the word Mormon anymore. He was an LDS missionary down in Brazil, and he met Pedro Sauer in Brazil, and he convinced Pedro to come to the United States and live in Provo, Utah, which is pretty remarkable that I was there at the same time.
Yeah.
And Steve says to me, "Hey, Mark, is this Mark Schultz, Olympic wrestling champion?" "Yeah." "The greatest jiu-jitsu fighter in the world is in town. Do you want to fight him?" He's talking about Hickson Gracie.
Okay.
I didn't know what to think. And I go, "Well, what are the rules?" And he goes, this really pisses me off. He's trying to intimidate me. And he said, "There are no rules." And I was like, "What? What are we going to commit a homicide? What do you mean there's no rules?" So, but I wasn't going to let anybody punk me.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, you meet me in the BYU wrestling room. You know, it's when I get back from the NCAAs, and we'll fight it out. I'll fight anybody. I didn't know what to think. I couldn't even focus for a whole week. I was thinking, what the hell's going to happen?
Yeah.
And I got in the room. It was Hickson Gracie. I saw him scooting on his butt, trying to hook my head coach. I was Alan Albright's assistant coach. He was hooking Alan Albright's heels with his feet. And I didn't know what they were doing. I had never seen jiu-jitsu or anything.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I walk in the room, and I didn't tell anybody this was going to happen, but the room was packed. And people had cameras in there, and I was like, man. So I walk in the room, and everybody stops, and Hickson gets up and comes over to me, and he goes, "Are you the guy?" I go, "Yeah, I'm the guy." "Are you the guy?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm the guy." And he goes, "What I do when I fight is I punch, I kick, I headbutt, I knee, I elbow, but we're not going to do that today. We're going to do submission grappling until one of us taps out." And I was pretty relieved there was going to be a homicide that day. So I took him down and I held him in a cradle for about 20 minutes. And then he went for a triangle. I had never seen this move before. He wrapped his legs around my head and my arm. And I kind of let him have it just because I was so strange I didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, I'm tapping out. And I was like, wow, that was really cool. Let's go again. So we went again for about another 20 minutes, and I was on top the whole time, but I couldn't get him in anything because submission holds were against the rules of wrestling. So I had never practiced submission holds. So I'm making things up on the spot. Now, I had done a little bit of judo, and I knew enough to keep my elbows in and my chin down, but I didn't know much other than, the double wrist lock, which they call a kimura.
Yep.
And so he knows how to stay out of submission holds. So he's staying out of all my submission holds. I've been on top of him for like 20 more minutes. And finally I thought, well, I've been on top of this guy for 40 minutes and I haven't gotten anything. I'm going to let him get on top of me, just see what happens. So I let him reverse me. And because I'm a wrestler, I brainwashed myself to go belly down. Well, that's the dumbest thing you can do. Yeah. And he puts in a rear naked, and I'm tapping out again. And he says, afterwards, he says to me, "Mark, you're the toughest guy I've ever gone against." And when he told me that, I fell in love with the guy. And I thought, I have to learn what he knows. Mm-hmm. And he had a student, Pedro Sauer, living in Provo. And I call up Pedro and I said, "Hey, can I be your student?" And he's, yeah, come on down, my friend. And me and him became great friends. And now I'm one of his black belts.
Yeah, I was going to say you're a black belt. Much respect for that. People don't realize how much time is involved, even to get a stripe on your belt, the discipline, everything. I've known guys in jiu-jitsu for years and years, and they're purple belts, blue belts. So yeah, much respect for that. I've been in jiu-jitsu for a long time too. Not anywhere near your level, but I really love jiu-jitsu. Like it's a thinking man's sport. You got to think 2 steps ahead of the next guy. You got to anticipate what's going on. For lack of better words, you got to be really smart in jiu-jitsu. It's not a lazy man sport, not a dumb person sport.
No, it's very technical. And I really like Pedro because he's so small. Yeah. He has to be very technical to be able to fight against bigger guys.
Yeah, man. My wife said our daughter was taught under Carlson Gracie. She was taught under Pedro too. All my daughters have been in jiu-jitsu too. So we're kind of a big martial arts family here.
It's great self-defense, man. It's like
it is, yeah.
Combination of wrestling and jiu-jitsu together is better than either of them separately.
Yeah, jiu-jitsu, it's excellent self-defense. I've been in martial arts since I was like 10 years old and started out with Taekwondo. And Taekwondo, it's horrible for self-defense. It's the worst thing you can use in practical self-defense. My grandmaster told a story. One of the students just got his black belt. He was a cocky, arrogant dude. Just got his black belt, went to the bar, was going to celebrate, wanted to pick a fight to prove his skills. So he's mouthing off to these guys at the bar. Next thing you know, one of this dude's buddies grabs a beer bottle, smashes it over his head. He's in the hospital with like 30 stitches. Taekwondo didn't save you on that. So
no, Taekwondo by itself, I don't think is that effective. However, I think Taekwondo is incredibly effective at teaching you how to kick hard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And that's part of fighting.
Yeah.
I mean, Joe Rogan has some of the hardest kicks in all of the world. And
he does.
He's a Taekwondo guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen some videos of him like just kicking bags, and that's crazy. That's crazy power. I wish I could get that kind of power, but I can't. What is it about jiu-jitsu that's different about wrestling, would you say?
Well, the gi makes a big,
yeah.
And the fact that it's nothing but pure submission holds and chokes, whereas wrestling is all about taking your opponent down to the ground. What people don't realize about the effectiveness of wrestling is most fights happen on hard surfaces like the ground or the concrete or dirt or something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless you're on the beach, everything's going to be really hard that you're going to be, fighting on. And if you're a wrestler, chances are you're going to get the takedown. Or if you do get taken down, you're not going to stay taken down, especially a collegiate wrestler that knows how to escape and ride. He's not going to lose control of his opponent. And if you can just get your opponent's head somewhere near the ground, if somebody in jiu-jitsu jumped into the guard against me on a concrete surface, I'd smash his head in the ground as fast as I could, as hard as I could, and the fight would be over. But jiu-jitsu is superior when it comes to submission holds, and boxing is superior when it comes to punching, and Taekwondo and Muay Thai is superior when it comes to knees and kicks and striking. And it's the combination of wrestling, jiu-jitsu, boxing, and Muay Thai is really the ultimate martial art.
Yeah, when you were for your UFC fight, how good were you at striking? You got some.
I mean, I had a punching bag. I put a punching bag in the BYU wrestling room, and I could punch hard, and I could kick hard, but I followed the model of Hicks and Gracie. When I fought in the UFC, I tried to be as much like him as I could. I kept my distance from my opponent until I saw my opening, and then I closed the distance and took him to the ground.
Yeah, every time you shot him, it was just like that. You took him to the ground quick. I don't think he was prepared for your ground game.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have been prepared had it not been for Hickson and Pedro.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way I would have stepped in there had it not been for those guys. But because of them, I knew I was going to win. I knew it.
Yeah, you have a crowdfunding that you want to talk about.
Yes, I do. See how I look like a hillbilly from Louisiana? My crowdfunding. I when I was wrestling, I would grit my teeth together so hard that I created like hundreds, maybe thousands of micro fractures in my teeth. And I was told in 2008 that my teeth were disintegrating so fast that I had to get 8 root canals and the crowns over them, or they were going to disintegrate. And so I went through the procedure, but then I had a heart attack in 2019 on December 14th. And I saw this documentary called Root Cause, and it showed a high positive correlation between root canals and coronary artery disease. And when I saw my the largest coronary artery in your heart's the left anterior descending coronary artery. And when I saw a picture of that and I saw how restricted the blood flow was through that and how much of a difference it made when they went in, they put a stent in there and now the blood flow is fine. But I went through the process of getting rid of my root canals, starting with the molars in the back. And because I didn't want to ruin the way that I looked. But the problem with taking your molars out in the back is your molars are for chewing. Your incisors in the front are for biting. And when I took my molars out with the root canals, I lost my ability to chew. And so I used my incisors to chew. And because my jaw is too strong, the incisors were too weak for my jaw, they broke off. So I started a GoFund. I went to the implantologist dentist yesterday. I started fundraising 3 days ago. I went to the implantologist yesterday. He told me it's going to cost me $53,000 to replace my teeth with implants. So if you go to GoFundMe.com and you go to Help Mark Schultz Restore His Teeth, that's the name of my campaign, you can donate money to help me restore my teeth. It's very difficult for me to do this. I don't feel comfortable asking people for money, but I'm not in a very good financial situation I don't have $53,000.
No. That link to the GoFundMe is in our comment section. I put it in there, and I'll put it in the description. But
thank you.
If you guys can share something, donate something, or if not, just share it on your social media. Try to help spread the word.
Yeah, just share it on their social media.
Yeah. And
if you can't donate, that's fine. Just share it.
Yep, absolutely, for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. I guess that's all we have time for. We're going on almost 2 hours. Mark Schultz, thank you so much. I feel like I have 2 more hours of questions to ask you, so I would love to have you back on sometime.
Okay.
On.
You bet.
Yeah, thanks again. We'll see you guys next week.